May 24, 1941. 0600 hours. North Atlantic, Denmark Strait. In the gray pre-dawn light, through mist so thick it clung to steel like a living thing, the German battleship Bismarck steamed southeast at 28 knots. Her massive guns, 8 15-inch rifles capable of hurling armor-piercing shells weighing nearly a ton across 20 miles of ocean, were silent now. But 3 hours earlier, they had spoken. And when they spoke, they destroyed the pride of the Royal Navy in 3 minutes. HMS Hood, 42,000 tons, the largest warship afloat, the symbol of British naval supremacy, had exploded in a fireball so violent that only 3 men out of a crew of 1,418 survived. 1 shell, 1 penetration through thin deck armor, 1 magazine detonation, gone. HMS Prince of Wales, Britain's newest battleship, had taken hits and withdrawn, her guns malfunctioning, her bridge splattered with blood. Bismarck herself was damaged, forward fuel tanks ruptured, 1,000 tons of oil leaking into the Atlantic, speed reduced, radar out. But she was free. And Admiral Gunther Lütjens, commanding from Bismarck's flag bridge, believed the mission could continue. He was wrong. But it would take 4 days, 3,000 miles of ocean, and 1 critical decision by a British admiral to prove it. Aboard HMS King George V, steaming south from Scapa Flow at 27 knots, Admiral Sir John Tovey faced a problem with no good solution. Bismarck had a 12-hour head start. She was faster than his battleships. She had open ocean ahead of her. And she had just demonstrated what she could do to the finest ships Britain possessed. Tovey was 56 years old, a veteran of Jutland, a man who understood that naval warfare was as much about endurance and fuel as it was about guns and armor. He knew his options. Chase Bismarck into the Atlantic and hope to catch her before his fuel ran out, or guess her destination and try to intercept. But there was a third element he understood better than most: radio discipline. At Jutland in 1916, poor radio security had cost the Royal Navy a decisive victory. British transmissions had been intercepted. German fleet commanders had known where the British were. They had escaped. Tovey would not repeat that mistake. So when the crisis came, when HMS Suffolk lost radar contact with Bismarck at 0330 on May 25th, and the entire British fleet faced the possibility that the most dangerous German warship afloat had vanished into 3 million square miles of ocean, Tovey made a choice that seemed, to many of his captains, insane. He ordered radio silence. Complete radio silence. No transmissions. No position reports. No course changes broadcast. No requests for clarification. Captains would operate on standing orders and initiative. Cruisers would shadow if they regained contact, but they would not signal unless absolutely necessary. King George V would burn fuel at maximum rate, guessing Bismarck's course, and hope the guess was right. For 93 minutes, the British home fleet went silent. And in that silence, the hunt turned. To understand why this decision mattered, you need to understand the scale of what was happening. Bismarck was not just a ship. She was 50,000 tons of German engineering, the most modern battleship afloat, faster and more heavily armed than anything the Royal Navy could put against her one-on-one. Her mission, Operation Rheinübung, was to break into the Atlantic convoy routes and destroy the merchant shipping that kept Britain alive. If she succeeded, the war might tilt. Britain imported 2/3 of its food. Every week, convoys crossed the Atlantic carrying grain, oil, steel, ammunition. Lose those convoys, and Britain starved. Bismarck could sink 20 merchant ships before breakfast. And the Royal Navy would have to pull capital ships from the Mediterranean, from the Far East, from convoy escort, just to hunt her. Hitler's surface fleet was small. He had no carriers, only 2 operational battleships, a handful of cruisers. But if Bismarck could tie down a dozen British warships for months, it was worth the risk. So when Hood went down and Bismarck escaped into the Atlantic, the entire Royal Navy mobilized. Admiral Tovey had the main battle fleet: King George V, the battle cruiser Repulse, the carrier Victorious, cruisers, destroyers. Force H steamed north from Gibraltar: battle cruiser Renown, carrier Ark Royal, cruiser Sheffield. Every available submarine moved to patrol zones. Coastal Command flew search patterns. The net was vast, but the ocean was vaster, and Bismarck had 12 hours lead. The night of May 24th into 25th was chaos. Suffolk and Norfolk, two county-class cruisers equipped with early radar, shadowed Bismarck from extreme range, reporting her course and speed every few hours. Victorious launched Swordfish torpedo bombers in failing light. They found Bismarck in a rainstorm, attacked through heavy flak, scored one hit. The torpedo struck amidships but did negligible damage. Bismarck shrugged it off. By midnight, she was still making 24 knots, still heading west. Lutyens sent damage reports to Naval Group West in Paris. Fuel was critical. Forward tanks hold. Speed sustainable but not indefinitely. He made his decision. Abandon the raiding mission, head for the French coast, reach Brest or Saint-Nazaire, repair, sortie again. At 0330, Bismarck executed a sharp turn to port, then reversed course to the southeast. Suffolk lost radar contact. For 3 hours, the British had no idea where Bismarck was. She could be heading west into the Atlantic, or south to France, or even doubling back toward Norway. This was the crisis. Tovey, 400 miles astern in King George V, had to decide. If he guessed wrong, Bismarck would escape. He had perhaps 48 hours of fuel left at forced draft. After that, he would have to turn back or risk running dry in mid-ocean. Every captain in the fleet wanted orders. Every cruiser commander wanted clarification. Every destroyer skipper wanted to know, which way? Tovey gave them silence. At 0600 on May 25th, instead of broadcasting a fleet signal with updated search vectors, course changes, and rendezvous points, Tovey shut down. King George V went dark. Repulse followed suit. Victorious maintained silence. The cruisers, already operating under standing orders to maintain contact and shadow without engaging, received no new instructions. So they continued searching on their last known vectors. And for 93 minutes, the Atlantic was quiet. No British transmissions. No position fixes. No frantic radio traffic that German direction-finding stations could intercept and triangulate. Tovey turned southeast on instinct and fuel calculations. If Bismarck was heading for France, she would have to pass within range of Coastal Command search aircraft. If she was heading west, Suffolk would regain contact. It was a gamble. But it was a gamble Tovey made with full knowledge of what radio silence could do. Because he remembered Jutland. He remembered German signals intelligence. He remembered how easily a careless transmission could give away a fleet's position. And he knew that if Bismarck's direction finders picked up British radio traffic, Lutyens would know exactly where the pursuit was. So Tovey went silent. And waited. At 0733 on May 25th, Lutyens made the fatal mistake. He broke radio silence. For 30 minutes, he transmitted a long, detailed report to Naval Group West in Paris. He reported the sinking of Hood. He reported damage to Prince of Wales. He reported his own damage. Fuel leaks, speed reduced, radar out, heading for France. He reported his position, his course, his intentions. And across the North Atlantic, from Scapa Flow to Land's End, from the Faroe Islands to the coast of Ireland, British direction-finding stations swung into action. Within minutes, Bismarck's position was fixed. The signal reached Tovey at 0800. Bismarck was southeast, heading for France. Tovey had been right. But more importantly, the 93 minutes of British radio silence had worked. If Tovey had broadcast orders at 0600, Bismarck's signals intelligence would have fixed King George V's position. Lutyens would have known how far behind the British fleet was. He might have changed course. He might have increased speed. He might have reached French air cover before the British could close the range. Instead, Lutyens had no idea where Tovey was. The silence had masked the pursuit, and now, with Bismarck's position fixed, Tovey could coordinate. King George V turned to intercept. Repulse followed. Force H from Gibraltar, Renown, Ark Royal, Sheffield, adjusted course to block Bismarck's path to France. The noose tightened. But it was not over. May 25th was a day of frustration. Bismarck was still making good speed. French air cover was only 600 miles away. U-boats were moving to escort her in. Tovey pushed his ships harder. King George V's fuel gauges dropped. Repulse burned oil at a horrifying rate. The destroyers began peeling off, one by one, too low on fuel to continue. By dusk on May 25th, Tovey calculated he had perhaps 12 hours left. If Bismarck was not slowed, she would reach air cover. And if she reached air cover, she would reach France. And if she reached France, the hunt would fail. Everything depended on the aircraft. Ark Royal, steaming north at 29 knots, launched Swordfish at midday on May 26. The first strike nearly attacked Sheffield by mistake. Identification in bad weather was nearly impossible. The second strike, launched at dusk, found Bismarck. 15 Swordfish, ancient biplanes with fabric-covered wings and open cockpits, flew into a storm of flak. Bismarck's anti-aircraft guns filled the sky with shell bursts. The Swordfish were so slow, 90 knots, that German gunners had trouble tracking them. One by one they dropped their torpedoes. Most missed. 2 hit. One struck amidships, doing little damage. The second struck aft, near the rudder. The explosion jammed Bismarck's steering gear. The massive ship, 45,000 tons of steel, began circling helplessly to port. Damage control teams tried everything. They tried to free the jammed rudder manually. They tried steering with propellers. They rigged emergency steering gear. Nothing worked. Bismarck could not steer. She circled slowly northwest, directly into the oncoming British fleet. Lutyens sent a final signal to Berlin. Ship unmaneuverable. We shall fight to the last shell. Tovey received the report at 0100 on May 27. Bismarck was crippled. King George V and HMS Rodney, a Nelson-class battleship with 9 16-inch guns, closed at maximum speed. At 0847, they opened fire. The range was 25,000 yards. Bismarck's guns answered. Her first salvo fell close to Rodney. Her second straddled King George V. She was blind, crippled, circling, and still fighting. But she could not maneuver. And the 2 British battleships pounded her. Rodney's 16-inch guns smashed Bismarck's forward turrets within 10 minutes. King George V systematically destroyed her fire control systems. By 0915, Bismarck's main armament was silent. She burned from stem to stern. Her superstructure was a twisted wreck. But she would not sink. British shells had destroyed her fighting ability, but could not penetrate her armored citadel deeply enough to cause catastrophic flooding. Tovey, desperately low on fuel, ordered ceasefire at 10:15. He detached the cruiser HMS Dorsetshire to finish her with torpedoes. At 10:36, Dorsetshire fired 3 torpedoes into Bismarck's starboard side. Then 2 more into her port side. At 10:40, Bismarck rolled over and sank. Of her crew of 2,200, only 114 were rescued. Another 200 were in the water when U-boats were reported nearby, and the rescue was abandoned. 2,086 German sailors died. The hunt was over. Bismarck had been afloat for 8 days and 15 hours since leaving Germany. She had sunk the Hood. She had damaged Prince of Wales. She had led the Royal Navy on a chase across 3,000 miles. And she had been destroyed. But the reason she was destroyed came down to one decision. Radio silence. 93 minutes on the morning of May 25, when Admiral Tovey refused to broadcast, refused to give away his position, refused to let German signals intelligence fix his fleet's location. Those 93 minutes forced Lutyens to transmit first, and when he transmitted, the British fixed his position. And once his position was fixed, the net closed. Without radio silence, Bismarck might have known where Tovey was. She might have adjusted course. She might have reached France. The war would have continued differently. Tovey understood this. After the war, he wrote extensively about radio discipline, about signals intelligence, about the need for silence in pursuit operations. He knew that the decision to go dark on May 25th was the hinge. Everything else, the Swordfish attack, the jammed rudder, the final gun battle, flowed from that decision. The human cost was immense. Over 3,000 sailors died, British and German. Hood's crew, Bismarck's crew, men burned, drowned, blown apart. The strategic cost was different. Bismarck's destruction ended Germany's surface raiding strategy. Tirpitz, her sister ship, spent the rest of the war hiding in Norwegian fjords, never daring to sortie. The Kriegsmarine never again challenged the Royal Navy in open battle. The Atlantic convoys continued. Britain survived. All because one admiral chose silence when every instinct screamed to transmit. Tovey's decision teaches something fundamental about command. Sometimes the hardest choice is to do nothing, to trust subordinates, to refuse the urge to control, to let silence mask your position while you maneuver. In an age of instant communication, constant updates, real-time coordination, the lesson feels almost alien. But it worked. 93 minutes. One order. Victory. If stories like this, single decisions that changed massive operations, resonate with you, we ask you to join our mission at Orders of History. Subscribe to the channel. Share this episode with fellow history enthusiasts. Help us uncover more moments where one choice altered everything. Did you know that Admiral Tovey's radio silence order gave the British exactly 93 minutes to reposition before Lutyens broke silence and exposed Bismarck's location? Drop your thoughts in the comments. What other moments in World War II came down to one decision? What other commanders made choices that seemed minor, but turned out to be pivotal? Because every detail we surface together builds a clearer picture of how wars are actually won. Not by grand strategy alone, not by superior numbers alone, but by human decisions made under pressure, in uncertainty, with incomplete information and lives at stake. Tovey had incomplete information. He had captains questioning his silence. He had fuel running low. He had an enemy 12 hours ahead with open ocean to hide in. And he chose to go dark. That choice honored the lesson of Jutland. It trusted that silence was a weapon. It gambled that Lutyens would break first. And it worked. The clarity matters. The details matter. Because if we forget how close these decisions were, how uncertain, how human, we lose the truth of what command actually means. It means choosing silence when everyone wants orders. It means trusting your judgment when the odds look impossible. It means remembering the lessons of the past and applying them even when it feels counterintuitive. Tovey did that. And 2,000 German sailors paid the price. And 3,000 British sailors were avenged. And the Atlantic remained British. One radio order. 93 minutes. The hunt for Bismarck.